Welcome to the We Are CC podcast. Thank you everyone for joining us for our official 10th episode. I'm Tom Crown, your host for this episode of When Animals Attack. Today, we'll be looking at bulls on a rampage. Joining me are a grown man who almost calls himself Poppy every time he answers his work phone. The guy who should be studying for school tonight, but instead is doing this podcast, Oz. And back from his adventures at the Avalanche Summit with tons of new alpha to share, Mr. Guys, I want to take this time to remind you, you can check out our previous 9 episodes. That's right. How are we on number 10? At weareccpodcast.buzzsprout.com. They're uploaded after our lives in beautiful edited format by Mr. X. Thank you so much. Guys, we have a bullish chart going on. We finally have some action on the market. Poppy, what are we talking about today?
Well, of course, we got to start with a little bit of talk about Bitcoin.
I love it.
Man, this has been a spicy week. There's no other way to put it. I know a lot of people out there that are having a very good time this week. I know we normally don't go into the price action, but just very briefly, perhaps, Tom, you'd like to recap what we're seeing right now.
Oh, yeah. I've been talking about it. I feel like that's all I've talked about, and it's okay. I'll continue on streams and whatnot the last 48 hours. So, oh man, we're wrapping up Q1, and what a first quarter of 2022 this has been. I think we can all agree, whether you're bullish or bearish, it's been pretty miserable. Price has really been sideways. The market has been, I'll say, at all-time lows for excitement. That's the best way to put it. And in the last, let's see, we have less than a week to go in March, and it's spicing up. We've seen almost no volatility, and with less than a week, I just keep saying this, the game theory, less than a week to go, this whole chart has turned upside down. We saw last week close above the 20 and 50 weekly moving averages. Those are the trend setters. With minutes to go in the weeklies, we're wrapping up this Q3. It's looking like it wants to close as a bullish hammer. Today, we broke a new 2022 high. There's reason to be excited. I think that's really the gist of it. Things are spicy again.
Yeah, and it also killed my prediction for so we have that weekly contest to predict the closing price every week, and almost everyone had predicted 42-ish to 44-ish in that little range. And then someone decided, nope, we're going to go higher. So that was fun. I think the
$1.
The guy that won, I think he did the meme, a meme price. But in any case,
a genius meme price. On to other news. Will Smith slaps. Oh, wait, wrong show.
Wrong one, but I spent all day looking at the memes.
I know.
So that said, let's not get too excited, but also let's pour one out for the bulls. I think this was a big week. It could be a very, very exciting start to 2022, that first quarter.
Cheers to that.
Yeah, cheers. But let's talk about what could be causing this. And I think this is always a popular topic because it's always the first thing on everyone's mind. I saw it a lot this week. There are people that were in shorts, meaning that they were trying to take or make profits on Bitcoin going down. They got wrecked and had a lot of questions. Why is it doing this? So revisiting some of the things we talked about on the earlier podcast, the first thing was I think that the U.S. Fed, the tapering, the interest rate rise, it was a little bit weaker than we originally expected. I think that was a nice surprise, and the market kind of came to terms with, hey, that's actually not too bad. The executive order, which we probably won't hear about again until September, when all of the reports are due back from different government agencies about how to address that order. But that came out. That was accommodating. And then the war in Ukraine. As long as it doesn't escalate, financial markets are increasingly kind of pricing that in. Now, here's the new thing I want to talk about. And for Mr., I know, you're the big DeFi guy. One of the very interesting developments in recent weeks is Terra. Terra, and then the UST, which is their stable coin, so US dollar Terra. They're buying a lot of Bitcoin and kind of putting you on the spot a little bit here. But have you been following that?
Yeah, have been following it. Big fan of Terra. It's a algo stablecoin, a partial algo at least. The bullishness around Bitcoin is definitely not just within Bitcoin maxis, right? It's being shared by the ecosystem at large, including Terra. And I think what you're getting at, Pap, is the 10 bill Bitcoin buy that they just announced, right? That they're intending to bolster their reserves, but with a pretty big Bitcoin purchase. That definitely aligns with the market sentiment we're seeing right now. I think it's great news. There's a ton of hype around Terra. This is not financial advice, and we don't shill here. But yeah, I'm personally a big fan.
Yeah, and we're going to circle back to that a little bit more of a deep dive later. But what do you have, Tom?
Oh, I was gonna say, you guys know my take, and typically something like that wouldn't be, an altcoin. You wouldn't hear me talk well about. But I absolutely love this idea. I think it brings legitimacy to some of these projects that I wouldn't really maybe take a second look at. But by bolstering the Bitcoin ecosystem by literally collecting Bitcoin, I love it. I love it, and I'm excited to see what's the next project. This is not going to be the last time we hear about altcoins starting to buy Bitcoin treasury, and it makes sense. Bitcoin is like the stable coin. They're adding to the whole ecosystem by buying and holding supply, and I think that gives some legitimacy to their project. Not that Luna is specifically or not specifically legitimate, but I love to see it.
I really like it. I think it adds a lot to it too. However, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm not the biggest in the know with DeFi, so maybe one of you guys could explain to me how this is bullish, because aren't they using UST to buy Bitcoin, which is their own token?
Yeah, so it's actually funny you bring that up, because I did want to dive into this a little bit. Maybe we can fast forward. So let's get back to this topic later. Let's fast forward to the UST and Terra piece, because this is, to me, one of the most interesting things this week that we have on the agenda. Just to kind of frame things again for everyone, Terra is a chain. It's a competitor to Ethereum, if you want to put it that way, right? It's another layer one that you can transact on, that you can build apps on. Terra has a stablecoin. Their stablecoin is called UST, US dollar Terra, and it's more or less an algorithmically controlled stablecoin. All right, what does that mean? Very briefly, because we don't want to get too deep into this, but there's really three kinds of stablecoins you can have. One's going to be a custodial stablecoin. That's like your Tether. That's like your USDC. That's your traditional kind, and that's the most common kind, right? Because it's the easiest to implement as long as you have a lot of cash. Basically, that's just saying for every coin you have, you just have that much in reserve, stored somewhere to match it. So you always have that much currency. Second is going to be crypto collateralized stablecoins. Now, this one's not quite as common, but this is where you've probably heard of DAI, D-A-I, or maybe synthetic. But these are ones that they maintain their price stability based on the underlying asset. In the case of DAI, it has a secondary coin called Maker, and then the supply of Maker just is adjusted as needed to keep that peg, to keep that DAI at $1. And then the third is algorithmically controlled. It's a little more complex, right? It could be a range of algorithms. But basically, the algos maintain the price pegs kind of in a similar way to the previous one, where there may be a secondary token. In this case, Terra's USD, the UST token, is paired with Luna. And the very short answer on how it maintains that peg is if the price raises above $1, which stablecoins, by the way, they do vary. They're not just locked perfectly at $1. They vary just a little bit. So if it starts to go over $1, then you'll mint more, and in the process, you'll burn some Luna, which will then drop the price. Now, if the price starts to drop, you kind of do the opposite, right? Then in that case, you'll buy the UST, and that should move the price back up, in theory, right? And Tom, you may, do you have any way to clarify that? Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, it's kind of a confusing thing that I'm not totally clear on either, but I know that essentially they keep the peg, and I guess what Luna's doing, and I'm not an expert, is keeping the peg algorithmically as opposed to what maybe Tether's doing, which would be manually, by expanding and contracting the supply. And that does make sense. That logically does make sense, but I wanted to answer kind of Oz's question there is, how is that really bullish if they're buying it, but aren't they buying it kind of with Bitcoin? And, what we've seen is Tether has done this. Some of Tether's backing is, collateral in crypto. And so is it bullish? I think the answer is, I don't have the details, but yes. And the reason being is it doesn't really matter what they're exchanging, right? It doesn't really matter what you're exchanging for Bitcoin, especially at this scale. What's happening is they're taking huge amounts of coins. And I think it's something of the tune of like 3,000 a day off the market. That is where the bullishness kind of for Bitcoin comes from, is simply just something is sucking these coins out of exchanges, out of wallets, and they're not directly available for sale on exchange. And in that sense, it absolutely is bullish, even though certainly Luna, in order to keep their peg, will, I think by definition, have to buy and sell some over time. But think about it, just the quantity is huge. On a finite asset, it's only really one way to cut it.
And I think there's a bullish narrative in the validation, right, from Do Kwon, the founder and the steward of the Terra ecosystem. He issued, is that how you pronounce it? Eschewed Ethereum in favor of Bitcoin as hard money, right? And I think there's, just this narrative of validation coming from left and right now, whether it's Russia or it's Do Kwon, it's bullish in the support and how the market is starting to view BTC as this kind of like quote unquote proven hard money asset.
Absolutely. Totally.
Yeah, and that's what we keep going back to that. And so I know some people listening to this, because I see it, and even at times earlier in my crypto, we'll call it crypto career, I've thought the same thing, which is Bitcoin's a boomer coin. It's proof of work. It's not efficient. Why do I care? Well, you care because it has endeared by far the most trust in the space, regardless of the narrative, regardless of the technology. It has the trust of people holding billions or maybe more now that nation states are stepping in, right? It has that trust element. And that is something that no amount of technology can buy. That's something that takes time, and it just takes that track record, right, of all those years of operations to prove that you're worth that level of trust.
To that point is also, it has the liquidity. That is, trust, absolutely. I would agree with that statement, but the liquidity is really a big value. Ethereum now has a large market cap, and it has liquidity to offer, but Bitcoin is unmatched when it comes to liquidity. If you are a huge player like a nation state, you can't jump into some low cap thing. There's no liquidity there. You're not going to be able to get your money back out. And this is another testament to Bitcoin's liquidity. Is this guy's looking to buy $10 billion of Bitcoin? You can't put $10 billion really anywhere else in the market. Maybe Ethereum now, maybe. But that is a big factor. And that is a testament to the trust of it. It's, you're going to be able to get your money back out. And that's a big problem with small projects is you see these big gains. You think, if only I'd put in $10,000, I'd have $1 trillion now. Well, in reality, you wouldn't have had the liquidity to get out.
Well, you're right, because you know what? A lot of people may not have seen this, but there are trillionaires out there that actually aren't trillionaires because the whatever meme coin they're in that's very low cap and has no one there, there's really no value backing that coin. They have a ton of it. It might be theoretically worth a lot, but if no one's buying what they want to sell, it doesn't go anywhere.
That's reality.
That validation narrative comes back here too, right? Because what we're seeing is institutional adoption, right? Terra is, for all intents and purposes, institutional money. And when we look at the way institutions are trying to use crypto and or Bitcoin, right? Liquidity is important because that is a risk. If you can't get out, there's no point in having it, right? It's like Musk. He did his quote unquote liquidity test, it was all that time ago. Because really that is important to a corporate balance sheet, is to make sure your assets that you're holding on your balance sheet are liquid, that you can access that cash. So again, right on point, I think, Tom, is the liquidity is begotten from just having that massive adoption, but it's kind of like that chicken and egg, right? Without the liquidity, you can't get the institutional guys. Without the institutional guys, you can't get that massive liquidity. I think we're starting to find that kind of inflection point in that respect, which is super bullish in my opinion.
Yeah, and this is the, as far as I know, this is the first time that Bitcoin has been a reserve for a stable coin. To me, that plays into a narrative that, I always think in my head, what would Satoshi think if he was here? Obviously Satoshi had this grand vision, and a lot's changed in the time since he created Bitcoin and then disappeared. But what would he think? And I think this is something he would love. But on the other hand, I did notice on crypto Twitter that a lot of Bitcoin maxis were kind of abrasive about this. I'm not putting all of them together, definitely not. But I don't know, Tom. Maybe you can shed some light as the closest thing we have to that.
No, I allow it. I allow it. I don't know. You guys know I've disconnected from the maximalism mindset of most other maxis long ago. I like to preach love and inclusivity, not hate and exclusivity and elitism. I don't know why they wouldn't like this. I saw a tweet. I can't remember where it was or who did it, but they were like, what do the maximalists think about that? And I said, I remember I tweeted back something like, what, that altcoins like see the value of Bitcoin? I think that's great. You're on my team now. I think it's crazy that people wouldn't like this. As a maximalist, you should be all about anyone, any source buying Bitcoin. You should be all about it. I don't understand how that disconnects. They're assimilating Bitcoin. That's the point of maximalism.
I personally would be super pumped. I am actually really excited. I think this is a phenomenal development for Bitcoin and for its legitimacy. Like you guys said, there's just a lot going on that plays into the whole narrative of, hey, Bitcoin is something that you can put your trust in long term, whether it's store value or it's something else, right? That is the narrative that we need to see if we want to see continued growth in this space. Like it or not, we need to see Bitcoin is going to be that first mover that's going to gain that mass adoption. It needs to be. Institutions and governments need to trust it, or else this space will always be stuck at maybe a few trillion, and it'll never grow beyond that, in my opinion. I don't know. Maybe you guys feel differently.
I actually think this sets a really good precedence because, we haven't really seen an order of this scale from an institution before. Obviously we have stuff like, Elon Musk. However, this is the first big DeFi project to really back with Bitcoin. And, I'm kind of glad that Bitcoin's getting a slice of the DeFi pie. It's getting a lot more money and it could open up a lot more doors.
Yeah, actually, DeFi is the one space that Bitcoin's been lagging in quite a bit. I know there is some Bitcoin DeFi, but I'll be honest, I haven't looked into it.
Yeah, there are some pretty big projects actually doing at least wrapped Bitcoin, right? I think the challenge has really been just the friction of getting that other chain integrated into a largely, because there are no Bitcoin, the blockchain doesn't support smart contracts, right? The Bitcoin blockchain. So I think that's been kind of the key kind of blocker. Not yet, right? We'll see. But
it's coming.
It's good to see the adoption because, hey, you never know, right? Maybe there's a hard fork coming down the line with virtual machine support. But, I'm not holding my breath, but I think it is bullish in that for DeFi, in that when you have the weather maker making moves and getting bullish, it's going to bring the entire space up, certainly, but also it's going to get folks exposed to crypto again, more again, right? Crypto may be less boring now, going forward, at least for the foreseeable, short-term future.
I think it's time to maybe move on to the next topic. I think we've probably, hopefully not overwhelmed anyone listening. The stablecoin discussion can sometimes get quite advanced. There's actually a bit more we had in the notes to talk about there, but I think it's a little bit of a deep dive. Start talking about iron.
To everyone listening, we don't even know all the details. Don't worry if you're lost. It's very complex.
Yeah. So the next topic, I like the headline I put on here. I don't know what I was thinking. Frosties. Who likes ice cream? That's supposed to be an internal.
I love Frosties.
I do. Yeah. I don't know. Is that like Wendy's or something? I love that.
Yeah, they don't have any dairy in them, so it's not ice cream.
Ruined it for me, but
yep, forever.
Like frozen yogurt?
Sure. Yeah.
You don't want to know what's in Frosties.
Huh.
Mostly petroleum.
So,
Oil.
anyways, I do love some good ice cream. But the big thing in NFT news this week, this is something that if you've ever been rug pulled, if you've ever been in a protocol that was hacked, if you've ever just lost out to some scammers and you were angry about it, I've been there. I talk about it a good bit because it's still to me one of the most influential moments in my crypto career. And it's one of those things that if you haven't had to endure that, it's really hard to describe what it feels like when you see a significant sum of money just fade away into nothingness because someone hacked or rugged you. But in good news on this front, this is perhaps for the first time and in a meaningful way, two scammers, they had launched a NFT project in January called Frosties. And I don't know, you guys probably don't do as much in the NFT space. The artwork was pretty cool. I would say it was branded well. The artwork looked neat. I could see why there would be an appeal. But as soon as they went live, as soon as they sold out, within an hour, they shut everything down. The contract was closed. The Discord was closed. The Twitter was closed. And the long story short, the FBI found these guys right as they were in the middle of doing a second rug pull. They had launched another one called Flamies or something.
Is that Embers?
Embers, yes. Thank you.
I was on Wendy O show and I was talking about this. Why does crypto have the stupidest like scammers? Please, out there, if you're a scammer, don't. I'm not inciting you, but it's like if all they had to do was deliver, right? Mm-hmm. And they could have delivered a absolutely crap product. They could have delivered like just, I don't know, MS Paint images that they drew in 2 seconds, and like all of a sudden it's not a fraud.
Yeah.
But they like decided to go down this path. I don't understand.
Well, even better, think about this. Pixelmon made $70 million off of that truthfully pretty garbage art. Sorry guys in Pixelmon. Aside from everyone's favorite Pixelmon, but yeah, you could have just made that legit. Why didn't they? That's a great point. Why didn't they just do that?
It's lazy.
Just walk away. Say,
do you guys remember when Twitter was hacked last year or the year before, and someone had access through like API to literally every account on Twitter and could post on their behalf? Yeah. And they posted like a giveaway scam. And they made $150,000.
Is that it?
That exploit was probably worth billions. And they made $150,000 went to jail.
Yeah. So what you're saying is
what are you doing?
They need to up their game. Please don't.
Well, let's hope they remain that way, though. I don't want them to get good, but
maybe to hire us.
But I mean, to me, this is actually. I mean, okay, this sets a precedent, and some people are uncomfortable with regulation in the space, or the other end of that regulation, which is the enforcement of regulations or laws. But to me, I personally welcome it. And I did see some people, as I've seen in other hacks and other rug pulls, say, hey, code is law. Stuff happens. I'd rather not have any government, police, anyone in this. If it happens, it happens. I don't know. What do you guys think? I'm personally of the opinion that in this kind of case, I welcome the police. Please arrest the crap out of these guys.
At least don't be lazy.
Well, yeah, don't be lazy. I think don't be stupid as a criminal, but hey, I think you're giving a little bit too much credit to the criminal class there, Tom. They're doing that because there's a reason they're doing that. Anyway, I think it's a slippery slope, to be honest, Pap, because where do you draw the line when it comes to regulation on what is considered nefarious and not? Right. Mm-hmm. So given that statement, that's my disclaimer, asterisk, right? I think it is a good thing because, and sorry to all the anti-regs and the pure code maxis, but as a space, we are not going to find legitimacy as long as there's ammunition for politicians to point to things like rug pulls and exploits and just lack of consumer protection. Right? Because if you look at the current narrative right now, it's all about ooh, we got to protect the consumer. Like it's not very well educated right now, but the fact that they can get there is a narrative there that does hold true, right? Because there are a lot of scams, and sure, maybe folks should be more educated going into these things, but at the end of the day, if we want true mass adoption, we want scale, that is going to have to come with addressing some of these FUD narratives, in my opinion, from the political class. So I do think it's a good thing, but I do think it's a very slippery slope, which is why we need the smartest people on those regulatory committees. Whether that happens, that's up in the air, but that's at least my 2 cents on that.
I think that's fair. I think it's extremely fair, especially given some of the recent developments this year when you see stuff like Canada locking bank accounts from people that were donating Bitcoin. And, I don't remember all the details, but just the fact that they even tried to exercise, some sort of influence over a decentralized space, it's got to make you nervous. I don't think there's any realistic way you could shut down, say, the Bitcoin network.
Not possible.
But you could make life very hard for anyone whose identity is doxed, is KYC'd, which is probably most people listening to this right now, right? I know I personally have KYC'd to so many exchanges just because I need that fiat, that US dollar on-ramp, off-ramp. And it is what it is. I'm not I don't want to make it sound like only criminals want to avoid that, but like I have no reason to avoid that. But on the other hand, I don't want the government, say in the future, if the government isn't maybe taking my own interests as a priority, maybe the government's abusing its powers and
wanting privacy. There's nothing criminal about that. That's I know you're not making that argument, but I hate when people make that argument of if you have nothing to hide, then why do you need privacy? Exactly as you said, you never know when government's going to change their minds, when government changes hands, etc. Like privacy is absolutely needs to be a human right, and we need to have some kind of digital. I think we need some kind of digital Bill of Rights that needs to come out in the next maybe decade, and privacy has to be at the core of that. Simply not wanting everything in your life public does not make you a criminal.
I really, really, truly agree with that. And I think it's something that's a little bit harder. And I'm not pitting one generation against the other, but I think this is a little bit harder for, say, Zoomers and the younger generation to understand. But there was a time when not, your entire personal life, everyone you talked to, every transaction you had at the bank, every phone call, every email wasn't basically accessible to your government, to whoever. And that's changed a lot. And even our kind of personal comfort level with that, since stuff like Facebook, MySpace, Instagram,
TikTok,
has become so popular, and people forget that, okay, you might be okay with it today, but not everyone in every country is going to be in the same circumstances you are. And that information can be abused quite a bit.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to name countries, but there's countries right now that are arresting people for just publishing things on social media. Quite a few countries.
Yeah, well, look at
things that
the data leaks, the hacks, the breaches. Even if the government had the absolute best intentions, if they got rid of privacy or continue to get rid of privacy, even if they had the best intentions, constantly we're dealing with these big databases having breaches, having leaks, and it's like if that information's out there, it's gonna propagate. It's gonna make its way out of there via whatever methods, even if the people that are in charge are very much, on your side or whatever, we'll give them the benefit of the doubt. It seems very difficult to secure data. And so I think that, it's like privacy is necessary.
I mean, look at Russia right now and Anonymous, right? They just got compromised in a huge way to the tune of, what was it, like 1.2 or 2.1, I'm transposing numbers, trillion terabytes worth of data. It's irresponsible in my opinion, and
absolutely.
I'll just get up on my soapbox here for a minute. But well, I mean, isn't that what we're doing here anyway? But it's just irresponsible and maybe straight up ignorant, or maybe it's ego in there too, to think that any humans can do right by people at a mass scale, but also be trusted to not F up. right? And that happens time and time again. And the issue is there is no accountability. So really, when we talk about privacy, we're talking about, in my opinion, the concept of accountability of this data protection. Because look at Experian, right? Look at the hacks. They control so much sensitive personal financial information, and they've gotten breached multiple times, and they're still allowed to continue operating with minimal changes to their model, right? There is no repercussion for just being poor stewards or poorly handling this private information. And you can't do it, you can't fix it after the data is out there. You have to do it now. And if it sounds like it's a hard line stance, it's because you cannot do it after it's already happened. You cannot protect your data after it's already out there. So now is the time. So totally agree.
So then to circle this back to the original topic. So, okay, why do we care in the crypto space so much about privacy?
Well, I think, because there's the argument for the sovereignty over your own wealth. And that's really only going to come with being able to control who has access to, your financial information, really, at the end of the day. But I think, there is also something to be said for the fact that without that privacy mindset, right, we are setting the stage for the eventuality of really massive CBDCs, right, central bank digital currencies. And when you think about what the implications of programmable money are, I think without having protections for privacy, you can really, the government, when I say you, the government really can reach really far and deep into your personal life and control what you have access to, what you can buy, right? What you may be able to spend on. And I think, privacy maybe is not being considered so much right now, but that is the first step. None of this other stuff gets addressed without privacy as that first step. So for me, I think the larger implications are the freedom of financial movement in the long term when CBDCs are de facto, right? They are just widely used by all nation states. That is what we're preparing for. And we're talking on years-long timescales, right? We may go through multiple bear and bull markets before that really becomes a reality. But now is the time to prepare.
I agree. If you're sitting there and you have the ability to sit back and say, I'm not that worried about it, consider that a privilege that not everyone in the world has. Some people are living in a nation that they don't have the same rights as you, and the ability to control your own money, which really in this day and age, money is the key to everything, the key to higher education, the key to better quality of life, the key to a better home for your family, for you. It's everything. So, having that sovereignty is a big deal. So I guess, end soapbox, going back to the original topic, be careful about the NFTs you buy, but also potentially, if you're okay with it, be glad that the government is looking for scammers in this space and trying to make an example of them. So I'm curious to see how long those guys, I'm curious to see how the trial goes, but also how long those guys end up in prison if they do. Because I love NFTs personally. I'm a big fan. As a sometimes wannabe artist,
You're an artist.
Love it.
Your artwork is beautiful.
But there's no doubt it is full of scammers. So I would love to see that cleaned up a little bit.
I don't have a problem with the government going after scammers.
Mm-hmm.
I think crypto exists in spite of everything. Everything wants to stop it. Everything's centralized. And it exists in spite of that. And that's what makes it strong. And so I'm okay. Government, go after people that are legitimately, blazingly scamming. I don't think there's a problem there. If crypto couldn't handle it, it wouldn't be here.
But that's just it, though, right? I totally agree. Like, get the nefarious guys out of here. They're giving us all a bad name, right? But really, if you're relying on government to define who is nefarious and what constitutes stepping over those bounds, that's what worries me. It's the definition of what a scammer is, definition of what a nefarious actor looks like, right? I don't trust
It's a good point.
the people, right? That's what it comes down to, people, right? I don't trust human emotion. I don't trust human opinion. And really policymakers, that's all they have to go on, right? They don't know anything else than to, kind of just parrot out what their stakeholders, right? Their campaign donators really want. And so that worries me. So that's my counterpoint to that. Not that I'm anti privacy, but it does.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And maybe we're scammers because we support Bitcoin at some point.
Exactly.
And then there's the problem. Yeah, that makes total sense. I think maybe that comes down to democracy. Probably a topic we'll get into another day. It's like then those people need to be removed, and everyone should be able to say, "Hey, you're identifying incorrectly here. You can't just put people in jail." I don't know. It's a good point, though.
You have to remember, these are the same people that question Mark Zuckerberg, and I think we all remember exactly how that went. It was a shit. Can I swear? Yeah, I can swear.
I guess you can now.
Too late.
It was a shit show.
Keep it classy, but yeah.
It was awful. Like, half of the questions, they didn't even understand how the internet works, and now we're asking them to define crypto. Like, these people can't really comprehend that unless they put a specialist team for it. I don't really feel they're fit to determine who's a criminal and who's not, considering they don't even know how to log in. That's a very dangerous precedent.
Yeah.
So.
Gets into a big topic too. Generational perspective on crypto is going to vary widely. And so it goes back to was it the last episode where we talked about getting boomers on board with crypto, helping them to understand what it really is, the values of it, because they also have by far the most money to invest. So, yeah, one day, but one step at a time. I do think this is the year that crypto and especially Bitcoin has been just knocking down left and right, just knocking down all these maybe notions of what it could be in a kind of fuddy sense, and like you're seeing the real utility, and that's exciting. Maybe this is just another one. Maybe the privacy piece will be respected within the space a little bit more when people understand why it's important.
Yeah, the people wondering why Elon Musk didn't double their Ethereum are the people making laws right now about crypto. It's scary. Their definitions are going to evolve, and who knows if they have the guidance. I think that's why everyone here needs to reach out to their elected officials and voice how they feel. It's very important.
That's exactly it, right? Because the narratives that exist today are only possible because the policymakers don't feel threatened by the will of the people. But make no mistake, right? They work for us. And until the only way that we can get them to realize that is through engagement, is through action, right? And I think what you were getting there, Tom, was, reach out to your local politicians, right? Your district congressmen. It is important for them to understand that this is the will of the people, right? And if it becomes a louder voice than the dollars that they get from banks and the billionaires, then that could start to change things. But that won't change on its own.
It will not change on its own.
Absolutely.
That's important. If we don't say anything, nobody will.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and you bring us to the next section. Well done, sir. So
it's almost like we had an agenda or something, Pappy.
It's almost like we did.
Amazing.
We'll skip to the next one, which actually, I'm going to skip over the first one, but to follow up what you said, we were going to talk about some of the headlines that we saw this past week, because the news, for many reasons, is obviously important to follow the news. Sometimes it can be used for misinformation. This is something that some banks and big investment hedge funds actually do use, but it's just good to be informed. So one of the things we saw as a headline this week, this is the headline: Grayscale threatens legal action if SEC rejects Bitcoin ETF conversion bid. This is a really big deal, and everyone listening to this should be really concerned about this. We want to see an ETF. We want to see an ETF that supports Bitcoin spot trading. Right now, we only have one. It's for futures. In my opinion, I don't know if any of you guys have a different opinion. In my opinion, that means it's a little bit easier for the big boys to manipulate stuff. Spot would open it up to a lot more people, including, the boomers we were just talking about.
Pappy.
It would allow them to more.
Oh no, just sorry.
Yes.
That was a joke.
Who's calling you a boomer?
Oh, you're
Took you a
calling me.
while.
Yeah, I get your joke.
Oh,
That was a bad joke. Okay. But it would open it up to more people is really the key, right? The more people, the better. The more people, the more liquidity Bitcoin has. The more liquidity Bitcoin has, the harder it is to manipulate. And anyone that's been in the space for a minute, I know the mantra that you're just waiting to see what the whales are doing because the whales are driving the price, right? Well, you're going to want more people to make it harder for them to do that. So basically, Grayscale, the largest holder of Bitcoin in the world, is threatening to sue the US government if they don't get the ETF. And before I ask you guys for some comments, I'm just going to note, you can go to Grayscale, just Google Grayscale. They have a whole website about this. You can do like Grayscale SEC. They have a website that explains what the issue is. And then they provide a link you can click on to email the government about it. Go straight to the SEC. Highly encourage you to do this. Every voice matters. Every single person that reaches out to them matters. We really want to see this.
can you imagine if this whole sub did it?
Oh,
If all of our
that
CC
would be
did it?
insanity. That would be insanity.
Just
Maybe we
saying.
should make a post.
Could bring down governments.
So let's get your guys' thoughts on that, though. Do you agree with me that we want to see this ETF?
Yeah, I think it could be huge because, I mean, we're looking at it and it's a company trying to not only fight for Bitcoin, but then also just get Bitcoin to the masses. And with a spot ETF, you don't just have paper Bitcoin now. You actually have real coins that, are not taken out of circulation, but, more coins in more hands. And it just opens up so many doors to new money. And it could really be like the maturity that we need to see in the market. So I think overall, it's a really good thing.
Take a look at gold. It's hard to believe, but gold got an ETF, right? Gold's been around forever. The US started an ETF on gold in 2004. It really sounds like gibberish. But 2004, and then for the next 10 years, gold trended up. 10 years, a decade. It's just up, only up. I think a physical ETF is a very positive thing for an asset's price.
It's not just a positive thing, I think. I agree. Yes, it's good for the price, but it's good for, in my opinion, the space in general. When you start talking about liquidity, right? Okay, let's not talk about the space in general. Let's talk about it just in terms of Bitcoin, right? Because when you talk about liquidity, exactly, the liquidity, the depth of liquidity is what's going to prevent the massive volatility, the massive spikes up and down, right? And what an ETF is going to do is overnight, right? As soon as that ETF goes live, we're going to see so many abstractions on top of that ETF in terms of financial vehicles, right? Securities, derivatives, that we're just going to see a massive boom in effective liquidity, right? And that's going to increase market cap by way of, price. But really from a trader's perspective, it will introduce a lot more volume, I think, which is, I think, key to Bitcoin's success, right? We do have to make sure that these spikes are less catastrophic, right? People get wrecked on these spikes, and the only way that mainstream adoption, let alone being able to use BTC via Lightning, maybe as an actual currency, as a form, as a way to settle payments, the only way that happens is if you can smooth out this volatility, right? So I think the ETF is great. It does open the doors to big money playing around with the price, but that is a free market dynamic. That is healthy, right? And from a market health perspective, that's what we should be going for. So in that way, I'm on board too. Let's do it. ETF all day. I'll be sending a little email once I find my stamps to go talk to my congressman, let him know, like, hey, we care about this stuff.
It should be criminal, though. They've approved derivative ETFs, but not a spot ETF. And I'm not even sure if that is Grayscale's case. I don't know what their case is. I have to look into it more. But what kind of world are you looking out for the safety of investors when you're going to allow derivative forms of an asset, but not the actual literal form of it? It's I can't see it as in any other way other than like criminal.
Money,
you know
money
the
talks,
answer.
sir.
We hate to say it, but it lets their
That's right.
banker friends do what they want to do. Hate to say it, but this is food for thought. This is why I keep going back to this. Why do we care about the spot ETF? Because to me personally, it brings in the boomers. Why do we care about the boomers? Well, even though they're getting quite advanced in age, compare them to a millennial. So I think millennials are probably the next. There are other generations, perhaps the most significant next generation to them. So millennials, we'll just use America as an example. Millennials only control 4.6% of the wealth in America. Boomers control 53.2%, which is about $60 trillion. So, you know, crypto is probably dominated by millennials. I would love to have those boomers in here.
Absolutely.
That's a whole lot of money to add.
There's a lot of
We
money.
ain't spending
Your
it on
generation doesn't have
houses.
any. I'm sorry.
Kids.
I'm sorry, Oz.
Oh,
You guys-
man.
Or anything else practical. Just avocado toast.
You're
And lattes.
Just lattes.
Well,
and
yeah,
avocado.
you're right, and we're not going to get
I
to. You know, I didn't want to get into that, but there has been, as a millennial, my entire life felt like it was defined by the boomers, just pardon the language, but shitting on us a little bit, blaming everything on us, and I know that happens.
we
with
won't
every
do it,
generation,
though.
to a degree, right?
I
But
promise.
really,
we
truly,
won't do it.
we can back it up by numbers. Because we've been through how many recessions, we've been through how many in a lifetime financial crises, and it seems like they just keep on coming. And at this point, we're lagging seriously behind our parents and our grandparents in terms of accumulation of wealth. And, you know, that kind of seems backwards, right? We feel like the world's progressing, technology's progressing, the quality of life's getting better, but we're getting poorer compared to our preceding generations. That doesn't sound right to me.
Isn't that the point of technology, the point of advancement, that we all have more?
Exactly. And so that's again, going back to why does crypto matter? It matters for a lot of reasons, but making the world a fairer place is a big part of it. So next headline. This one I really enjoyed. Because I've seen this in a few times. So Fortune magazine ran a headline of, "Is the crypto winter over?" For Tom, you, I believe, are perhaps the longest lived crypto trader here and someone who's been through the definitive crypto winter after the 2017 bull market. Would you call the past 3 months a crypto winter?
Well, maybe the last year. Yes and no. Sentiment-wise, yes. In fact, I would say if the last year didn't mirror, there's a possibility that it was even more depressed the last year. I have never seen interest in crypto so low. And maybe that's the confirmation bias or something, but the energy was just sapped from the space. I want to say, honestly, it started like in February of 2021, but it really took hold, November. Once we started trending down from 69K, like people just were out. They were on, the world was demanding their attention. There were other things going on that's, were more important. It was definitely a sentiment winter.
I always had a hard time articulating that to people because they saw the price go up and they thought, bull market is back on. But looking at the trading volume, looking at sentiment indicators in the market, looking at other on-chain data, the bull market really wasn't back on. It was a short-lived rally. It was an impressive rally. It hit a new all-time high. And if you asked, I know you have your own opinions on this, right? But if you were to ask someone to articulate it in terms of like an Elliott wave, which is kind of a traditional way of framing the market, it was actually a corrective period, meaning, normally price would drop, but the corrective wave kind of got a little bit excited and went a little bit higher. But psychologically, people were checked out. I really agree with that. And it's only recently, I think, we're seeing this, again, sentiment starting to turn in a meaningful way.
It's starting to turn, yeah, but certainly not recovered, not like it's starting to turn. The number went up, so people are not. They've broken free of a little depressive chain, but in no way are we back to maybe Q1 of 2021 yet.
Oh man, yeah, that was a fun time.
I think that's such an easy answer to this, though. I mean, if we just look at the returns, in 2020, we had 302% for the yearly close. And in 2021, we had 57%. And while obviously the price still went up, these returns is just nowhere what we used to see. So, I feel like it's fairly clear why people are kind of getting disinterested in the space because, well, not everyone, but a lot of people are more interested in making money. And after you have that steep of a decrease in returns, it's obvious that quite a few people are going to lose interest quickly.
Yeah, that's really logical. But something that doesn't really factor in is, so you look at 2020, you say, that's a huge return. Well, as someone who was in the space making content every day, there was no hype. There was no interest. There was only interest in 2022, I would say in the last month or two, November, December. The entirety of that year, very, very low hype. And so in retrospect, yes, it's just like a funny dynamic. It seems obvious, but it wasn't obvious at the time.
You got to think too, most people listening to this, let's say you're newer to crypto, you probably didn't get in March of 2020. You didn't see those massive gains. People talking about like a million billion % on getting Matic or Polygon,
infinity
at the March 2020 low. You didn't do that. You probably got in when you started to hear about it in the news, which would have been, let's say, maybe December, maybe January, or maybe all the way into April, May, right? And so at that point, in former cycles, we would have had that parabolic blow off top, and people would have rode that up, and wow, that would have been exciting. But we didn't. It in terms of percent gains, it was the weakest cycle yet. And I think you're right, Oz. There's something to be said. That's at least a factor. That's something to think about, which is the cycle. You hear from OGs about how old cycles were. It was a different one in terms of gains, very different. Kind of changes up the math a little bit. Now we're seeing, obviously, this cycle. I guess this gets into a different topic, right? And is this cycle different? What do you guys think?
It's not over.
It used to be a meme.
It's not over.
It's never been over. That's the secret.
Used to be a meme that saying that this time's different. I heard that so many times from OG guys, like mocking me because I'm a newer trader.
Yep.
Only been a few years that I've been active.
That was me.
But
that was probably literally me to you, Poppy. I'm sorry. I apologize.
It might have been. But looking at it now here in March, almost April of 2022, do you guys think this time? I feel like it is different.
I feel it's different, but not really in a good way.
Yeah.
It's been a weird, choppy market. And I mean, obviously I didn't have the experience like Tom or a few of you other guys, but I mean, from at least my opinion, it's been quite hard to trade just because the price action has been so sketchy and a lot of it has definitely been heavily manipulated. It is.
It's fundamentally different. And I was one of those people mocking Poppy, saying, this time's different. That's what they always say. It was, though, and it is. Look at the market. Bitcoin has never hit an all-time high, like 69K, and then just traded basically sideways. It's never happened. It's undeniably different. But I think we can also say, well, if Bitcoin just takes off now in this year, in 2022, it doesn't have to be tomorrow, but if it takes off, it goes to some crazy number, it very much then resembles the rest of Bitcoin. So it may look different now, and it may not look different by the end.
Kind of like the one theory of the extended cycles, longer cycles, meaning it just takes longer for Bitcoin to build up that momentum, and in turn, the crypto markets, following it to build up that momentum to the same levels that we saw before. That's an interesting topic, right? And I think we'll continue to revisit that through 2022. But as far as the Fortune magazine, the headline is "Crypto Winter Over." Time will tell, but I think it's realistic to say that if it was over, I would have called it last month. I think we started to see the markets turn a little bit. That doesn't mean we're going to 100K now, but things are looking promising, obviously.
Well, not to be the wet blanket here, but we're not in the clear just yet, right? We've seen some indicators turn bullish, but just turned bullish, right? That is not confirmation in my own opinion, at least. And we do have some resistance zones just right above our current price point. So with all the bullish narrative, right? I think it goes back to what you just said, Pap, is the time frames. That is what it comes down to. Is it may not go parabolic just yet. It may be that is in the future, but we're not quite confirmed on full on rocket mode, right? But I think that it is different. Like Tom, you were saying, it's look at the price action, right? There's no ATH where we haven't cratered afterwards, and I think that's a good sign. That's the liquidity. That's the depth of liquidity that we're seeing coming into play. So, I think it is different this time. But also, I think let's be a little bit cautious, right? It's not really full on bull mode confirmed just yet, but I think we'll get there.
Yeah, I think you're telling people what they need to hear, which is honest truth, right? We don't know for sure, and I think you just got to trade safely. I think I had a note somewhere in this. I don't know that we got to it. Which was just to encourage people, because they're looking at the price. They might be excited. Hey, we broke above the bull market support band, the 20 week SMA, 21 week EMA. That's a big one that a lot of people watch. Above it means bull, below it means bear. We are above it right now, but that's no guarantee we'll continue to go above it. So please use stop loss. Please trade safely. That's always worth reminding people, because some people don't. So I think we'll cover one more of these items, and then it is getting to the hour, top of the hour, and we'll want to move into the Q&A. But this one, I thought this was interesting. So for those who don't know, there's a gentleman called Craig Wright who claims to be Satoshi, who's don't sue me, sir. You're probably not Satoshi, in my opinion. I'm not an expert. This isn't an official endorsement or anything otherwise of RCC, but I don't think he is. So anyways, he is from the earlier days of Bitcoin. That much is true. And he had sued the Bitcoin Foundation. I don't know. There's like 12 or 16 developers that he had sued to modify the Bitcoin contract to give him Satoshi's Bitcoins, because he supposedly lost the keys in a password protected file and all of its backups, and everything mysteriously got removed or deleted in a hack prior to February of 2020, conveniently right before the new bull market started to take off. So
what a clown.
What do you guys think? What's your opinion? Do you think Craig Wright really lost those? Oh, by the way, the end of the story is the judge voted against it. They said basically Bitcoin developers don't owe you a darn thing. That would set a terrible precedent. Also, it doesn't make sense. They just manage the chain. There's no reason that they should be, hacking, modifying the chain to give you stuff that you lost. So that's good news. But what do you guys think? Any thoughts on that?
It's a joke.
Well, you know what? I think that is this case, right? This judge's decision is good, right? Because I think what it really shows is the attempt by Craig Wright to push this through. That damn sure proves he's not Satoshi, because the Satoshi was all about sovereignty, right, of your own wealth. And to be honest, with that sovereignty comes your own responsibility to yourself to protect your keys. So sorry, if you lost your keys, you lost your wealth. That is at one of the fundamental tenets. He would know that, and he wouldn't go to the courts to try to reverse that, right? So
Satoshi would know that.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
It's the last thing he would do. It's so silly. And this isn't the first, to my knowledge, this is not the first legal battle he's tried to wage or has waged against something to do with Bitcoin, right?
I don't think so.
Right. He's gone through so many legal battles to try to, prove that he's Satoshi that I think it's just
All he has to do is sign a transaction with the keys. Satoshi would know that.
indeed.
Any of them. I think Satoshi had quite a few wallets, if I remember right. Not just a few, but quite a lot. Yeah.
Well, if Craig is listening, hey, Craig, we can probably help you out. We take payment in BTC and we'll unlock your keys for you. How about that? There's the offer right there. Let's see what happens.
You know what though? I think he has won some other cases for like slander or something. I forget. He sort of pseudo won a legal.
He won a case against, I think, BTC.com to take down the white paper, but he won because the person who controls it didn't want to dox themselves. They'd go to court. That's the case I remember him winning.
That
but
makes sense.
He may have more. I'm no expert.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but we
The judge is very based.
he's very based.
I like it.
He's so based.
Craig, you can come on to the podcast anytime you want, sir, and I will give you
open invite.
Honestly, I'll absolutely give you the chance to fully defend yourself, to clarify anything you want to clarify. I'm open to hearing it out. Maybe you are Satoshi. I don't believe, based on what I've read, that you are, and I think this would have set a terrible, terrible precedent for everything that has grown from Satoshi's vision. I mean, just to unleash all those coins, to have devs. I mean, I don't even know if they can, but assuming they could, boy, that would set a terrible precedent for crypto. I would hate to see that happen. So glad that judge voted that way, or made a decision that way.
Thanks for joining us for our historic 10th episode, everyone. It's been amazing. Cheers, and here's to the next 10. Have a great night, and 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 have a great night.